Pleased to meet you, everybody. I'm very honored to be here to this very important seminar. I will talk about climate crisis, energy transition for peace. So let me start with climate crisis and COVID-19. Climate crisis and COVID-19 are two of the important issues that the international society has to work together to address, to ensure the survival of humankind. Both are deeply related to economic globalization. And COVID-19 was caused by changes in ecosystems due to climate change and destructive development, and changes in distance between human and wildlife. So we need to make an early transition to an energy economy that is less prone to pandemics and can avoid climate crisis. Now, what Russian invasion of Ukraine revealed? Russian invasion of Ukraine was a powerful reminder of the urgency of ending our dependence on fossil fuels. It is needless to say that war is the greatest destruction of human rights and environment. The environmental damage in Ukraine caused by Russian military action is enormous and long-lasting, including attacks on nuclear facilities. An orthodox approach to energy and environmental security is to promptly reduce dependence on fossil fuels and expand renewable energy and promote energy efficiency and conservation. Next, let me talk about green recovery. Economic recovery measures intended to get out of economic recession due to COVID-19 is an opportunity to achieve sustainable development goals. Conventional economic recovery measures, such as support for fossil fuel intensive industries or expansion of construction projects, may contribute to short-term economic recovery, but cannot expect long-term structural change to a decarbonized society. Green recovery measures should contribute to the transition to decarbonized society and the realization of SDGs, which is also called Build Back Better. And it includes new lifestyles and work styles such as low carbon employment, renewable energy, and teleworking. And I would like to underline that the climate crisis is real and urgent action are required. You may remember that the continuing extreme weather events, such as high temperatures in Western Europe, Japan, North America, and typhoons in Japan, floods in Pakistan, hurricanes in Florida and Canada, wildfires in California, Southern Europe, and drought in China. In particular, Pakistan, 1/3 of the land of Pakistan is underwater due to floods last year. And against this backdrop, we are now facing the challenge to the climate crisis and are required to arrive at a net zero society. Since COP26 held 2 years ago in the UK, it has become a de facto standard for many countries or corporations to aim for net zero emission of greenhouse gases by the middle of the century in their national development strategy. So in a sense, the 21st century economy is an era of great competition for decarbonized market. But we need to identify specific pathways for economic and social change towards decarbonization, and we have to identify policy measures to achieve reform and require financial resources. And we also need vision for decarbonized society and the green industrial policy. According to a report by the IEA, International Energy Agency, net zero by 2050, a roadmap for energy sector, it is stated that in the next zero pathway by 2030, solar and wind will quadruple, and electric car sales will increase by 18 times, and energy intensity of GDP will improve 4% per annum. These figures are very impressive, but in order to attain this pathway, an unprecedented investment for clean energy will have to be made. This involves this investment for end-use infrastructure, electricity generation, and low-emission fuels lifts global economic growth. This figure shows between 2020 and 2050, demand for coal falls by 90%, oil by 70%, and natural gas by 55%, according to the IEA, International Energy Agency. Then how can energy security be improved? There are two approaches. One is demand-side approach. The other is supply-side approach. One of the most promising demand-side approach is to promote energy efficiency and conservation. And as for the supply side, the most promising means is to expand renewable energy. There is a trade-off between fossil fuel imports and decarbonization. And as for nuclear, there remains such problems as risk of accident, final disposal of nuclear waste, and rising cost. And according to also IEA report, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and energy savings are cheaper and faster and create more jobs. And new solar PV and wind have low abatement costs, as do nuclear lifetime extensions and repowering existing wind and hydro facilities. Solar PV provides the largest boost to jobs. This figure shows the cost comparison of power generation, energy technologies in the US. And you can see that nuclear and coal-fired power plant power is more expensive than solar or onshore wind. Now, let me just touch upon the overall evaluation of COP27, UN climate conference held in Egypt last November. One of the notable achievements of COP27 was a historic agreement to create a loss and damage fund to compensate for the loss and damage for the vulnerable countries such as Pacific Island countries or low-income countries. And on the other hand, no significant progress was made in strengthening efforts towards the 1.5 degrees target. And as for the climate loss and damage fund, we have to keep in mind that it was launched with the question of who pays for whom, especially vulnerable countries. and how much will be paid for what. So this has to be worked out in the coming months. And this year, in May this year, G7 summit will be held in Hiroshima under the presidency of the government of Japan. And I would like to see a G7 summit place climate crisis, energy shift as among one of the key agendas items in the discussions. And we need urgent review of domestic energy policy and energy shift, making renewables energy the main source of energy. It should be mentioned that nuclear power has high risk for military attacks. In conclusion, the climate crisis is a human rights crisis, especially the crisis of children's rights or future generations. And war is the greatest destruction of human rights and the environment. Attaining 2050 carbon neutrality is a responsibility for future generations. And realization of Paris Agreement goals such as 45% reduction of greenhouse gas by 2030, net zero by 2050 will be very essential. And the transition to a decarbonized society has already begun, but the time is running out. And we need a zero emission as a new national development strategy, and decarbonization is a condition for economic survival, the beginning of the era of great decarbonization competition. And we have to move away from dependence on fossil fuels. The war in Ukraine complicated the transition path in the short term. But in the longer term, however, energy security and economic logic could converge to kick net zero transition efforts into higher gear. Bold moves would be needed at unprecedented speed to boost energy efficiency measures and adopt renewable energy alternatives to fossil fuels. If adopted, such actions could drive net zero technology down their respective cross curves and build a pathway to faster decarbonization in other regions. Decarbonization and fossil fuel world means climate change countermeasures and energy security. The war in Ukraine has not only unleashed a humanitarian tragedy, but has also dealt with the effort to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission by a powerful supply-side shock. Yet, for public and private sector leaders willing to take the necessary bold steps, the new logic of energy security and economic hold the promise of making this a turning point is in seizing the opportunity to address the globe's unfolding climate crisis. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
I have a question to Professor Matsushita. Recently, our Prime Minister Kishida published an article in the medical magazine. I'm not too well versed in this area, but there's a magazine called Lancet.
Lancet. That is the medical magazine.
So if you Google Fumio Kishida, Lancet, this article hits. So if there's anyone who hasn't read the article, please check. But in that article, our Prime Minister emphasizes the importance of human security. He talks about COVID-19. And I was encouraged by our speaker mentioning this concept of human security. But I was curious. I mean, how could he come out with such an article when he's really pressing the militarization of the world? I mean, doubling the defense budget and all this. So could you explain to us the background? I mean, what's the story behind it? Thank you.
Okay.
You can speak in
May I
Japanese.
speak in Japanese?
Yeah, please speak in
Yeah.
Japanese.
お答えは岸田首相に聞いていただきたいと思いますが、私の推測するところですね、岸田首相も政治家として大変キャリアのある方で、外務大臣も長く務めておられました。そして、日本の外交政策のですね、一つの柱として、ヒューマンセキュリティ、人間の安全保障を向上させるということがありますし、それから岸田首相が外務大臣時代にですね、2015年には国連で SDGs が採択されました。で、SDGs はその内容を見てみると、まさにヒューマンセキュリティを実現するさまざまな目標が掲げられています。ですから、そういったコンテクストでは、岸田首相が人間安全保障を提唱されて、その一環として COVID-19 についてですね、対策をすることを表明される、それはそれで良しとしたいと思います。ただし、今ご指摘のあった軍事費を増やすことであるとか、あるいは最近でいうと、原子力をですね、再稼働を増やしたり、あるいは新設増設をするということについては、十分な議論がされずにですね、請求に決定をして、アメリカのバイデン大統領と会見して、国際的にですね、公約をしてしまっていると。そういったことは、一つは民主主義的プロセスとして不十分ではないかと思います。国民的な熟議がされずにですね、重大な軍備の強化であるとか、あるいは原子力の新設増設であるとか、そういったことを、いわば前倒しでやってしまうといったことについては、十分注意する必要があるのではないかというふうに理解しております。以上です。ありがとうございました。
I have a question to both Dr. Volker Boege and Professor Kazuo Matsushita, which is with regards to the climate change-related losses and damages fund, which was announced after COP27. This was considered an extremely innovative and historical development, but I have a question related to what Dr. Boege mentioned with regards to loss of land. You mentioned that the Pacific people's connection to the land is critical. It's critical to their sense of security, cultural security, to their sense of ontological security. But this kind of loss, cultural loss, indigenous knowledge loss, cannot be quantified easily. So I was wondering how this fund, is going to deal with such unquantifiable, non-economic, tangible losses that these climate change migrants will eventually face.
それでは最初にですね、損失と被害、ロス&ダメージファンドというものが去年の11月に、エジプトで開かれた第27回国連気候変動枠組み条約会議、COP27 という会議で、そういうロス&ダメージファンドを作ることが決められました。背景を言いますと、太平洋の島しょ国であるとか、あるいはアフリカの諸国であるとか、そういった国はほとんど気候変動の原因となる温室効果ガスを出してない国です。しかしながら、そういった国が一番ですね、気候変動による影響、例えば小島諸国における海面上昇、水没、それから異常気象による被害を最も受けている国であります。 でしかしながらですね、これまで、30年以上前から、小途諸国を中心として、気候変動の原因を作った先進国が、そういう途上国等で起こっている被害に対して、経済的にですね、保障すべきであるという主張を30年以上前からしてきたわけですが、それが今日に至るまで正式に議論としては取り上げられてこなかった。アメリカ、日本もそうですが、先進国はそれに反対してきたんですね。というのは、もしそういうことを法的にですね、責任を問われると、支払い額が莫大になるということから、協議を避けてきたわけですが、今年のエジプトの会議で初めて、そういうファンドを作ることが決まりました。作ることは決まったんですが、その詳細について、誰がどれくらい、誰に対して払うか、誰がというと、例えば、先進国は多分対象となりますが、例えば中国を払うのかどうかですね、でどのくらいの額を払うのかどうかというのがあります。それから誰に対して、というと、そういう途上国といってもいろんな国がありまして、どこまでを気候変動の被害とするか、例えばパキスタンをですね、今年は大変に、昨年ですね、洪水で国土の3分の1が水に浸かったわけですが、いわゆる最貧国というカテゴリーに入っていないので、もしそういう最貧国に限るとすると入ってこないですね。ですから、どこまでを対象とするか、どの国を対象とするかということもこれから決めなきゃいけない。